1. Well, welcome to an edition of the PhinManiacs. Forgive me, there's so many shows going on anymore. Welcome to another edition of the PhinManiacs podcast. I'm going to be your host tonight, Chad Ranabam. With me is Ron from. Where are you from again, Ron?
Unsquish the fish.
Unsquish the fish. I forget. I know you've been working with us for months now, but I forgot your other thing, Unsquish the fish. Obviously, I'm the B team commentator tonight. Is Lewis is down. He's sick, so we're stepping in for him. I'm going to give my best effort to give you a good show tonight. We do have some fun stuff tonight. We've got an interview coming with Zach Vigil. We're going to give you some updates on the OTAs. We're going to talk a little bit about Josh Gordon and how that could potentially impact how Dion Jordan is looked at for reinstatement. We're going to obviously talk a little bit more about the draft and what's been circulating around in the mock draft and maybe who's been taking some visits and things of that nature. So we got a good show lined up for you. So I hope you get a good chance to tune in and have some fun with some Miami Dolphins talk. To get things started, I wanted to quick touch base. We interviewed Zach Vigil, and as some of you know, if you're a hardcore football fan, the Dolphins are now starting to report for their off-season training program. The programs right now are voluntary, but it's, as far as I've heard, and let me know if you've heard differently, Ron, I think everybody showed up for the off-season condition program. Is that what you heard?
That's what I heard, especially Ndamukong Suh, which is the one we're always watching.
Yeah, Suh showed up. I believe he showed up last year for the start. The big question is, does he hang around Miami? And I don't know if that he will or won't. And this is just my personal opinion. I don't think that it matters if Ndamukong Suh hangs around or not, because when you look at the defensive tackles in the NFL, Ndamukong Suh is always one of the higher end in terms of conditioning defensive tackles. So it's not like that guy has a problem keeping his body in shape. And we had some interesting reports, the last few days that Ndamukong Suh actually has a facility constructed that simulates the temperatures in Miami, and he gets hooked up to all these sensors and looks like the bionic man. And so clearly he's not off partying or not getting his work in. It looks like he's doing everything he can, both from a motivational as well as a technology standpoint. So hopefully we're going to get the best Ndamukong Suh yet coming for 2016.
Yeah, for sure. And I've never heard of a player actually doing that. I'm sure that they have, and athletes have done that, tried to do different things to simulate the weather conditions. We've heard of people and doing other things, sleeping in bubbles and tents, and just all kinds of different things. But it's good to hear a Miami Dolphin doing it, and especially Suh. That he, I mean, at least we know, and not that we didn't think he did, but he takes this pretty seriously and takes his performance pretty seriously and wants to improve this year over last.
Yeah, definitely. So I know he took a lot of flack last year because people thought he was subpar to his contract. And I guess if you're looking at the size of his contract, it's pretty hard to live up to anybody's expectations. But I thought he was a solid player last year. And especially as the season went on, I thought he played pretty well. So I'm really looking forward to watching him this year with the new coaching, with the new players. I really think Kiko Alonso behind him is going to be a huge upgrade with those two playing, at the level to level behind each other. So other things I noticed, I've just been kind of following a little bit as these guys stood up, is I thought Brandon Albert looked pretty good. He looked like he'd definitely been working this offseason, and he looked like he was in pretty solid shape, which is critical for the Dolphins. If he's able to hold down that left tackle spot for this season, that really gives us some breathing room, because clearly our left tackle of the future is still in need for the Dolphins, and we haven't addressed it in free agency, and it just doesn't feel like we have I don't know if the draft picks is the right word, but we definitely don't have the ability to go ahead and just draft a left tackle with the first pick in the draft, because I think our holes at D-back and running back aren't really allowing that. So I'm really, really hopeful that BA can hold down the fort for at least one more season before we have to invest some high draft picks into a left tackle. One final comment I'll make before I turn it back over to you, Ron, is I saw Cameron Wake just look like an animal. And so it's just amazing, considering I don't know where he's at functionally moving around, but he really is looked like he was in great shape.
A couple of things on the left tackle piece first. If you think about where we were at this time last year, we knew about Albert and the injury. We were scared to see what that was going to look like, and our backup was Fox. And now you consider that Albert's going to be, looking like he's going to be healthy coming in to go, good to go from the beginning. And also, I know that Bushrod's really going to be competing for that starting guard spot, but he'd be a much better backup at left tackle than Fox. So we're really better on both ends of that for sure at the left tackle spot. But I could see the Dolphins drafting Conklin, just to kind of speak to you. You don't think that they'd really do that. I could see them doing it if it just the guys on defense aren't there at 13 and they can't move out of that spot. I could see Conklin being a guy that they go with.
Yeah, I mean, he could be the best player available approach. It just feels like they're probably not going to. I'm pretty hardcore, feel like they're going to go with defensive back. But, it wouldn't shock me if they took the left tackle. I just don't feel like they have the luxury to do it this year. And Brandon Albert would clearly help them in that regard.
Well, I know we've talked about before, so kind of repeating myself from previous show or two, that Brandon Albert, contract wise, it makes zero sense financially to part ways with him, even in a trade over the next couple of years. It's a big hit to do that, especially this year. Talked about in a trade would be $5 million hit even to trade him. You're going to eat $5 million off the cap. So you're right, not realistic that they're going to dispose of Brandon Albert. If they did draft Conklin, they're going to be looking at him playing as a utility player or as a guard, at least for a year or two until, we move on from Albert once he gets a little older. But for now, Albert's a Pro Bowler. If he shows up and he's healthy, I'd much prefer to see us go defense on that first pick. So.
Oh yeah, me as well. And my other thought too is if Cam Wake can return to form, then that gives them the luxury of maybe not needing to get a defensive end so badly in this draft as well. So those are just two key players I was looking at, thinking if we can get a good year out of Cam Wake and Brandon Albert, it'll be a real big boost to the team in terms of their depth and their high end talent. Um, other news, probably anybody that follows Twitter has seen there's been a lot of publicity surrounding Josh Gordon and Johnny Manziel for that reason. I guess that seems to follow those guys wherever they go. But the big news is Josh Gordon is coming up on being due for his reinstatement after his year-long suspension. And I guess I'm not sure. You might know this from, but was it marijuana? I'm not sure what. And maybe they don't even release that, what he got suspended for this time around. But anyway, the league isn't just reinstating him like on the calendar year of when he got suspended, and so they're kind of leaving that in limbo. And I believe this is nothing but rumor at this point because this is supposed to be confidential. I don't know how this news ever leaks out, but supposedly there was something questionable happen with Josh Gordon, whether it was he had another positive or they had some kind of a diluted sample, something that was not quite right. And so that's what I'm hearing is the reason he's just not being reinstated. But obviously the concern on the Miami side is that what's going to happen with Dion Jordan. And again, I'm assuming something's going on more than just what we're hearing with the Josh Gordon thing. I think there may be something else to it, but the reality is the commissioner has that power. I mean, those guys have been suspended from the league and they're due for reinstatement, but the league isn't required to reinstate them anytime they want. The frustrating part about that is the fan for the organization is when you don't, it starts to punish the teams more than the player because the Dolphins have to prepare for the draft and they've got to decide, is Dion Jordan going to be part of this team right now? And technically, I don't think they've been even allowed to talk to the guy. And so that makes it pretty hard to know, is Dion Jordan going to be in our defensive end picture or is he way out of shape? Is he not even interested in playing? Is he going to fail another test? And so it leaves the teams in limbo. So I'm not a big fan of the league being kind of wishy-washy, if you will, about when they'll reinstate players.
Well, a few things on Josh Gordon. He applied for reinstatement, but it was denied because he failed a drug test a month ago. Now, this is according to ESPN, to their sources. But the failure wasn't a positive test. It was a diluted test, meaning it looks like he took some kind of masking agent, possibly, which to them they are now considering also a failed test. It's the same thing. If you test positive for a masking agent, then you might as well test positive for marijuana. So they said that he cannot reapply till August 1st. That's how it is on the Josh Gordon end. As far as Dion Jordan goes, I think I've said this numerous times over the last 2 months. If you're a team like Cleveland with Josh Gordon or like Miami, you're absolutely pretending like that guy, Josh Gordon / Dion Jordan, does not even exist. Like he's not even a player. You only know he's going to be one of the 90 coming into camp, and that's where it ends. And I think if they were thinking anything else besides being hopeful that, boy, wouldn't it be a sweet dream to have him come in and actually play well and be a piece you weren't counting on. But that's the key. You better not be counting on him on any form, fashion, even if he showed up in shape, because he could fail a drug test next week, as many he's going to have to take over the next year. So if you're the Miami Dolphins, and I imagine, I mean, any professional football team is taking that approach with these kind of players at this point. They are just pretending like, beyond the fact they're on the 90-man roster and they're going to get a shot like everybody else, they are not planning around them. They are a camp body, if they're even that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, those guys are both one strike away, and maybe Josh Gordon's already there if ESPN is accurate. But those, it's tough to rely on a guy that's one failed drug test away from being done. His whole career being done in the league. So that is hard to judge. But as a standpoint of approaching a draft, I as the GM would still want to know, even if the guy's even in shape, maybe from a depth. I don't believe in any universe right now the Dolphins are planning on Dion Jordan coming in to be their starting defensive end. But I'd like to know at least if he's even going to be showing up to camp to compete. Because right now, I haven't heard anything. I don't know that anybody has. All I've seen is pictures from like a year ago with him out of shape on a beach. And I have no idea what Dion Jordan has been doing since then. So, I mean, he could literally show up in shape like a beast, or he could show up at 290 and not even just get laughed at to not even realistically compete for a roster spot. And so and even that, you also have to factor in the cap and the financial side. Miami at some point has to decide, do they have to cut Dion Jordan, and when and how, and all that factors into your ability to evaluate the players. So I'm kind of an advocate of, when they deal out those punishments, to not punish the team as severely as you punish the players, and leaving it in limbo is not a good thing. But I was not aware on the Josh Gordon thing that he had the failed test with, or he's being reported of having, I should say, a masked or diluted sample or something.
Yeah,
Because
diluted is, I guess, officially the term they used.
either way, I mean, I'm by no means a drug test expert. I've taken one in my life for an pre-employment screen, but it's pretty simple. You show up, you pee in a cup, and you hand them the cup, and things don't go wrong. And so that's my take. When all of a sudden there's like a lot of like this and that and this and that with why the sample wasn't working right, it just immediately becomes questionable in my mind, because it's not like it's a complicated process to go take one and obtain a sample. So it makes you really, and I could see in the NFL standpoint, if his sample tested diluted, you got to be thinking, well, that's awful strange. So I could see why they're not going to reinstate him until that they do that. And another thing I do believe is, when those guys do get reinstated, I'm pretty sure they get a much more stricter testing policy than like a player that's never had a failed drug test. I think they get random tested, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they have to test like weekly or something like that once they get reinstated on top of that.
Yeah, I've heard numbers up to like 17 tests a month. I don't know that that's an accurate number. I've seen that from some beat writers, Dolphins beat writers before, and referring to Dion Jordan. I have no idea if that's an actual number or not, though.
Yeah, that's crazy. But anyway, I guess time will only tell on that one. But anyway, we're moving on to the next portion of the show, and we had the pleasure of getting to talk to Zach Vigil, a linebacker for the Miami Dolphins. He was a undrafted free agent last year, and Miami had a unique situation last year where they clearly had a need at linebacker, and he was one of multiple undrafted free agents that got a chance to try to make the roster, and he was one of the guys that did make the roster. For the Dolphins, he's primarily a middle linebacker. A lot of people use the term Mike in their offense, and he wasn't a starting guy from the get go, and he didn't play a ton of snaps, but he did get on the field. He definitely showed some flashes in camp, and he showed some flashes in the game. and we wanted to get a chance to catch up to see what he'd been doing in the off season. And he's definitely a guy people are going to be, watching this year in camp to see how he's performing compared to last year. So we're going to give you a chance to listen into that interview that we did today.
We are here with Miami Dolphins linebacker Zach Vigil. He's from Utah State, I believe, and we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun watching him at the community events last year, and he's here now. We're going to talk with him a little bit. Zach, nice to have you on with us.
Thank you for having me.
So now the off season is pretty much almost over. We're already getting started with the workouts, and we're getting ready to get back into football mode. Is there anything that? How was your off season, by the way?
Off season was great. We were able to go home, visit family and friends, do a little hunting, and do a little working the horses. So it was good.
Is there anything that now that you're back with the team, is there anything that you're going to be trying to focus on in your workouts? Something that you're going to try and you're something specific that you're looking to improve upon from last season?
I mean, every area of my game has a lot of room to improve, and I think that everybody's on the same page right now about getting bigger, stronger, and faster.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Have you gotten a chance to talk to Adam Gase yet?
I have.
And what do you think of him?
He seems like a great guy, and I think we're going to be moving in the right direction for 2016.
Well, certainly Miami Dolphins fans hope so. The expectation limit has been it's been the Twitter people, which is the microcosm of Dolphins fandom, have not been happy with what's been going on. So hopefully Adam Gase is able to turn things around for you guys.
Yeah, I think he's got a good staff in here, and I know everybody in the locker room is looking forward to this season.
Okay, so do you expect to do any cross training? Have you talked to Vance Joseph at all about what your role might be in this defense?
As of right now, it's just study, my position as a linebacker, which is going to be my at the moment. And I mean, obviously, you got to know all of them. And moving forward, and when they want to get more into that detail, they'll be more specific with me as to exactly what position they're going to have me looking at and studying.
So, hey, this is Chad, Zach. Just to follow up some of the questions Lewis was asking. Coming into this year, after you were a rookie last year, I hear a lot about the speed of the game, but could you kind of walk us through a little bit? What is when you came in here as a rookie? What do you think the hardest part is for these guys that come in, out of the draft and trying to jump from the collegiate level to professional level? Do you have a few specifics on what you thought was the hardest part to do?
Well, for me, it was just the speed of the fronts. I mean, the offensive linemen and the defensive linemen are so much faster across the board. And at linebacker, the offensive lineman at this level can get to you a lot quicker. So I think your explosive footwork, getting downhill, getting off blocks from a linebacker position, that is a whole nother level from college, obviously. So that, to me, the speed of the game, I mean, obviously, as the season went on, it slowed down a lot for me. But initially coming in, that was a huge difference.
Is there anything that, I'm sure that you get put on different training regimens? Has yours changed quite a bit from like what you were doing when you were at Utah State? When you were preparing for a season versus the NFL. I know a lot of people mention how much more grueling it is on your body because the season's so much longer. Do you have to change your diet and what you do to train a lot different? You think as a pro versus in the college level?
Yeah, I mean, in college, well, for me, my biggest thing was gaining mass. So, I had to just focus on gaining a lot of weight and gaining mass. But now I'm about where I want to be. And now it's taking care of your body. Like you said, the season's really long. So, guys are doing a lot of stuff with the trainers and with the strength conditioning staff, stabilizing muscle groups, massage, Pilates, yoga, anything they can do to keep their bodies healthy for the duration of the season.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have to imagine it's just crazy the amount of. I think a lot of people don't appreciate the amount of time and energy that goes into just preparing your body to be able to play the game. On top of it, I mean, obviously you have to have the amazing talent, but on top of that, I think a lot of people don't realize everybody's good. It's just the work that goes into it. As the fans, we talked to a lot of fans. They've been very excited about the addition of Kiko Alonso. Have you met him or talked to him yet? And I know it's just getting underway, but.
Yeah, Keegan and I have talked. We worked out quite a bit together the last couple of weeks, and Kiko's a great guy, and looking forward to working with him. Great enthusiasm, great locker room guy. I really enjoy having him here.
That's awesome. Yeah, everybody's really excited to see you guys playing together. So that ought to be amazing. In terms of Lewis had asked about the cross training. Is that something they do regularly in practice during the season, or is that a lot more in the training camp where they might throw you over to play the strong side or throw you on the weak side just so you learn the position? Does that change a lot during the season, or is that more of a preseason sort of thing?
As of right now, it's just everybody kind of sticks with one position for right now until you get a better understanding of the defense. And then when you have a good grasp on one, then they'll give you a little more and say, okay, well now learn this one. Then after you master that, then they'll say, okay, now learn this one. So it's a gradual process, so they don't overwhelm you all at once. So that can take place in the spring, or that can, on some guys, it could wait and take place in camp or even into next season.
Speaking of camp, last year you had a bit of a competition going with three other guys, Mike Hull and Jeff Luck. I think it's Luck, or is it Luke? I don't know which. There's a debate about that. Jeff Luke, Mike Hull, and of course Neville Hewitt. Like that was you guys had to competition. You all were undrafted free agent linebackers. And tell me a little bit about that competition. Like what was it like to be going up against all these guys who are pretty much in the same boat as you?
I mean, the biggest thing is there's no animosity there. Everybody's working for the same goal, and you're supportive. And I mean, we had a really good dynamic with each other last year, and we always wanted the best for each other. And fortunately, 3 of the 4 of us ended up sticking around, and Jeff's still floating around the league, so Jeff's still doing a good job. And that's just coming out and competing every day, and trying to put your best foot forward every single day. And like I said, 3 or 4 of us were able to stay in Miami.
I would imagine that you're going to have to play catch up with Neville. What is it that you're focusing on to go ahead and do that?
I mean, Neville's a solid player, and I just have to focus on what I do best and fix the things that I need to continue to improve on, and just master this new defense.
Speaking of the new defense, Zach, from a fan standpoint, a lot of people wonder. Obviously we hear the terminology of 3-4 and a 4-3 and different things, but are there any specifics that stand out to you that are going to be different this year from last year in terms of a scheme standpoint that you would describe?
No, I mean it's very similar to what we were doing last year. Just I think that we're just getting into it, but I think it's going to be really clean and crisp for us, and I think we're going to be able to fly around and play fast football and execute at a high level in this defense.
There was talk earlier about how the defense was either too complicated or too simple late last year, and then earlier this year it was brought up again. What was your take on what the defense was like?
Last year there's a lot to take away from last year, and I think we all learned a lot as a team, and we're just looking forward to moving on to this year.
Okay, and here's a fun little question. I believe, Chad, it was you who told me that Zach's brother is in the draft this year, and he's the 9th ranked middle linebacker. Just throwing it out there, Zach. What would you do if your brother somehow wound up in Miami with you?
That would be awesome to have my brother here with me, and it'd be a great opportunity to play together again, and it'd be a pretty cool experience.
What was it like playing with him before?
It was awesome playing with my brother. We grew up together. We were really close, and those 2 years I was able to play with him were pretty special. And if we had the opportunity to do it at the pro level, that'd be really special. So my parents wouldn't have to fly to 2 different parts of the country.
That would be cool. Are you going to be with him during the draft, or you have any idea where he's going to be at during the draft days?
He'll be at my parents' house in Utah, and I'll be here. So.
Yeah, I'm sure the nature of the game, but that's still going to be an exciting time. So that would be really neat to see you guys play together. I think a lot of people in Miami aren't aware of Utah State, not real big college, that you guys played there together. And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Will Davis a Utah State guy, or was I?
Will Davis was also at Utah State. Yep.
Yeah, that's impressive considering the size of the program. How many guys they're getting at that level, it really is. So do you ever make it back to the games there at all?
I wasn't able to last year. Depending on this year, we'll see how things fold out. Maybe I'll be able to make it to one.
Okay, now I have a more fun question for you. I'm contractually obligated only by mouth that I have to ask this question to pretty much everybody who comes onto the show. Did you watch Batman versus Superman?
Not yet.
Oh,
I haven't seen it yet.
What do you think it's going to be like? Because there's mixed reviews everywhere.
That's what I've heard. I've heard it's mixed reviews. I've heard some say it's good. I've heard others say it's not good. So I guess I'll have to see it for myself.
We're trying to determine of the Dolphins players who's on Team Batman and who's on Team Superman. So
yeah, I'll have to check it out and I'll get back to you.
You don't have a favorite right now?
I don't have a favorite right now.
It's like, I always grew up liking the Batman personally. So
I think it's just different though because it's not Christian Bale playing Batman. So that to me is weird.
Well, my Batman was always Kevin Conroy, the animated version. I mean, you can't have a better Batman.
that's good. I know you guys practice in Davie, Florida, but have you had any chance to check out the new stadium changes at all, Zach? We've just been seeing pictures and stuff, but it looks like
I have not had a chance to be there yet.
Should be a really neat place. So I know, obviously, you guys don't have any say, but there's been a lot of names thrown around. Do you have any favorites on what to call the new stadium? They're going through a name change at the moment.
No, I don't have any preferences.
No, not Vigil Field or anything like that.
Definitely not that.
Yeah, we're a lot of we have the older fans that want to keep it Joe Robbie, and not some of the newer fans wanted Hard Rock. I think, is that right, Lewis? Hard Rock's in play.
That was one of the rumored name changes. I could get on board with that though. I could get on board with Hard Rock since Jason Taylor and the foundation does all that stuff there. So that would definitely be a good choice for sponsor.
That would be pretty cool. So, yeah. Anyway, Zach, sorry we like to jump around on questions, so it's not all football all the time. But we did have a few more. In terms of when you played this last year, obviously you played against some, unbelievable players that, with the Patriots and Gronkowski and stuff. Do you have a player or two that you thought was one of the most difficult matchups you remember from the season?
When you play the Patriots, Gronk always creates a lot of issues for you. But like you said, we played against a lot of talented players, and so just kind of week to week and how the matchups, who's playing better that day. But Gronk's a tough guy to match up against.
Well, you're going to have an opportunity for that next year, of course, and to Martellus Bennett. So it's going to be even tougher than it was last year.
We welcome the challenge.
I like that swag. So thanks, Zach, for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, that was Zach Vigil, linebacker for the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins fans, the Miami Dolphins and AARP Foundation are looking for volunteers to team up for the 3rd annual Million Meal Pack, Sunday, May 1st at the Don Taft University Center Arena at Nova Southeastern University. Volunteers will assist Dolphins players, staff, and AARP volunteers by packaging more than 1 million meals that will be delivered primarily to people 50 and older in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. Come out and enjoy football activities and prizes while improving the quality of life for South Floridians. Visit dolphins.com/AARP Foundation for more information on how to sign up as a volunteer.
Okay, there you have it. That was an interview we had with Zach Vigil this afternoon, and I thought it was kind of a fun interview. He's definitely a confident football player, and you could tell he's a hard-working football player, more of a blue-collar sort of guy. And I'm kind of excited to see how his progression happens this season, because I don't think, I still seeing floating around mock drafts and all the so-called experts that Miami has a need at linebacker, and I'm not so sure that that's true. I could definitely see maybe an outside strong side linebacker or a tweener of sorts that can play DN or outside linebacker that can rush the passer. But I feel pretty good about having Kiko and Zach as probably our primary 2 middle linebackers, and then having Neville Hewitt as well as obviously Jelani Jenkins as our starting weak side linebackers. So I don't know that linebacker is a critical need on the team right now. How do you feel about it, Ron?
I'm not really sure where Alonzo is, and except for that addition, really, yeah, I still feel it's a pretty good need for us, honestly. I do, and you never know how some of these guys like Vigil and others could work out. What you think is a need sometimes going into the season isn't, and what you think is a strength can also turn around to not be a strength. We see that every year with every team. But I still feel right now on paper, I'd like to see us improve that linebacking core over the next couple years through the draft.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I personally like to see them to go big if they do it. I mean, obviously the ideal guy would be Ragland, who could, I believe he could play strong side or in the middle. But it's one of those things where our defensive backfield definitely needs an addition of another high end defender. And I don't want to draft a guy that if we did draft a starting middle linebacker, that would more than likely mean Kiko Alonso would slide over to the weak side, and that basically puts Jelani Jenkins on the bench. And not that that may not improve the team, but that's to me a long ways from it wouldn't make sense for me to do that and not have an addition at the defensive back. So I feel like it's not a critical need, but it'll be an interesting draft. I'll be surprised if they went linebacker in the first round. Not that it'd be shocking, but I just don't see them doing that right now when this draft comes in. I also, in that interview, it was interesting that we talked about his brother Nick. I don't know. He's going to be probably one of those bubble guys on where he'll fall in the draft. He may get drafted late, or he may not get drafted. And what I was most interested in is if he does not get drafted, will the Dolphins, because obviously they can use the depth, will they be interested in pursuing him and putting those two together on the same team? That would make for some, at the very least, some interesting camp stories.
Yeah, that will be fun. I mean, it put a little attention more toward to the Miami Dolphins that a couple brothers are on there, kind of competing for the same position, really. But I mean, there's no reason why they both couldn't be on the team if that were to happen.
Yeah, I like it. Just now, granted, I'm older, but I remember when the Dolphins had they were the Blackwood brothers, and they played safeties. Who they were a strong and free safety. It was Lyle and Glenn Blackwood. So I always thought that was kind of neat that they had brothers playing. So there's always part of me that helped. I mean, they're probably too high end to be able to make it work in the age of the salary cap. But if we get both Pouncies, I always thought that'd be so cool to have them both playing together on the line, and how that would work out. But
Now that would be an impressive interior of the line. I mean, honestly, to have both Pouncies, yeah, that would be pretty cool.
yeah, that's it. But a guy can dream anyway. In terms of the draft, obviously we're getting down to the wire, if you will, a couple of weeks from the draft, and a lot of people are. I'm really starting to see the mock draft swing more and more towards the Dolphins going after Elliott, the running back from Ohio State, and is it Ezekwe? Do you know how to say his first name?
I don't. I'm not good
I,
at pronouncing these names.
I
I
think
don't
I'm
want to butcher them.
close, but everybody knows who I'm talking about. He right now clearly is the number one running back in this draft, and it'd be shocking if he weren't the first running back taken. That if somebody took a running back other than him, and so a lot of people are wondering, will he fall to 13? And most people have the contention that no, there's no way he's going to fall that far. He's the best back in the draft, and he's an elite back. He's going to go before then. But I just run the numbers, and I'm definitely sticking by this. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I think this is going to be the most quarterback-driven draft you've seen in a while, and not because we have a tremendous quarterback class. I just think that this league has evolved into a league that you have to have a franchise quarterback. And I'm just going to throw some names out there right now. I mean, the obvious ones are the Jets need a franchise quarterback, the Rams need a franchise quarterback, the Broncos need a franchise quarterback, and I still believe the Browns got to strongly consider it, even though they picked up RG3. I think that's a hit or a miss gamble for them to not use their position in the draft to grab a quarterback. And then there's some sneaky teams out there. The Saints are another team I'm hearing. I believe they worked out some of the quarterbacks this week. And so, Drew Brees is getting up there where, he may be down to his last couple seasons. And so the Saints are realizing we've got to look at getting a franchise quarterback. And when you create that much demand, I'm predicting this draft's going to have some fireworks in it. I think you're going to see some teams make some moves. They're going to jump up there and go after those quarterbacks, because I really think there's only 3 legitimate first-round quarterbacks in this draft, and I think the demand for them is going to be high. And what that means for the Dolphins is you're going to have players like Elliott drop. You're going to have some of those higher defensive backs drop. You may even see some of the linebackers drop. And so, Miles Jack, the UCLA guy, he may be available to the Dolphins. And so it could create some interesting scenarios if those changes happen. And so I don't know what you've been kind of following this week, Ron, but do you think the Dolphins chances of getting Elliott are increasing right now, or where do you think they're going with that?
I mean, it's obvious that they're going to be targeting running back in this draft. If Elliott fell to them, I guess it just depends on how much they like him, whether they go that way. I just kind of feel like cornerback is the number one need on the team right now, and they could go. If the player I'd like to see fall is Hargraves. That's the one I'd love to see fall.
Yeah, the reports I'm seeing is it seems, I mean, obviously there's so many smoke and mirror games going on when you get this close to the draft, but he appears to me to be becoming more and more the number 2 corner in this draft.
Yes.
Obviously Ramsey being the number 1, but Ramsey he may even end up being the number 1 overall pick right now. His stock is through the roof, and under no scenario other than a big trade up do I see Miami going after him. But it does appear Hargraves is starting to be the number 2 guy, and so I don't know that Miami's chances of getting him are any more likely than getting Elliott. But the real question is if Miami goes and gets Elliott, let's say he falls to 13 and they grab him, do you think Miami would be able to get a solid cornerback still in the second round of the draft?
I kind of think that it's possible. I mean, Jackson the third is floating like right at the end, and Eli Apple's been kind of dropping to where he could even drop out of there, and then you have Artie Burns, so that's be it. But maybe they have to jump up a little bit, not even necessarily into the end of the first round, but maybe higher in the second round if there's a guy they really like. And I mean, they give up some draft position to do it, but if they want to kind of solidify 2 positions they're concerned about and want to get a bona fide starter at. Really, William Jackson the third would be the one I'd want the most to see them jump up and maybe try and get if they ended up taking either running back with Elliott, or they just had to go best available and took Conklin, which I still think is a possibility just based off looking at the way the board could work out. Now, if 3 quarterbacks go, before our pick, like you're talking about, could possibly happen, 3 quarterbacks, then it's a different story. But even with 2 quarterbacks going, I mean, the board just may not quite work in our favor, and they may feel like, okay, we need to get a bona fide starter at cornerback. We're gonna have to move up maybe 5-10 spots to really get our guy. So we'll see. Will it fall to us there in the second round? I think maybe Artie Burns. That might be about it.
Yeah, that's the William Jackson. That would be a tremendous round a pick, I think, because I personally think Miami's kind of targeted him in the first, and that's why they dropped back as they did, because they feel really confident he'll be there. But I don't know about if there's a huge talent differential right now between a guy like Hargraves and those guys. You take him in the first round, but it appears anyway on paper there is a big talent gap in the running back. If you don't get Elliott, I don't know that it even makes sense for them to take a running back in the second round, because they can probably get the running back position addressed in the third or fourth. In terms of there's not a huge differentiation of talent in the running back class really in this draft, and so it'll be interesting. I personally, I've been the biggest need. I 100% agree with you is D back, but I'm starting to lean more towards, maybe it makes more sense to grab Elliott if he's available there in the first round, and then maybe you take a D back in the second and the third round to address it. And as I think back in history, it's my personal opinion the best cornerback the Dolphins ever had was Patrick Sir. He went by Surtain and Surtan at different points in his career, but same guy. He did it all. He could do press coverage. He could play zone coverage. He could play in the slot. He was just tremendous, and Sam Madison was right there. You're talking top 5. Sam Madison's in that group, and I think both those guys were second to third round. I don't remember for sure, but do you remember, Ron? Weren't these guys like second, third round picks?
If I remember correctly, yeah, they all were.
So I guess the point being, maybe they obviously need the D back, but I'm starting to rethink a little bit the strategy standpoint where maybe that's something they can address, in the second and third round and still be just as well off if you grab a guy like Elliott. So it'd be very, very intriguing at the very least to see how that played out. I would say if Miami got a guy like Jackson in the second and grabbed Elliott in the first, I would think the general consensus would be a big win for the Dolphins in the draft.
If that happens, they crushed it. In my opinion, they crushed it. But there's a couple different ways you could look at this. It is obvious that the Dolphins, number one, let's forget what the fans think and what we think. Let's look at what the Dolphins think. It is obvious by the way that they're proceeding that in this case with Adam Gase, they feel like they got the guy they really wanted. They got their man at head coach, and they're proceeding as if he's going to be here for a while. And this isn't a Philbin situation where we're just going to try and load the team with talent in 2016 and get everything we can to fix it now. And it's obvious by just to me, the way they're hanging on to those compensatory picks for next year. I mean, we're talking next year. So that to me is obvious. So if you look about the way you'd want to build a team, if you draft a defensive player, especially like cornerback this year, and you waited till next year to draft a running back, there's a lot more to be had at running back next year. That's talent closer to Elliott, because there's really just one of those guys this year, just Elliott. That's it. But next year, you got like 3, 4, 5 guys that could really be really awesome running backs. You get that cornerback 1 year to develop. He's more of a starting caliber next year. A running back, if he's good, he could come out and firing day one, because that's the way that position is. So therefore, you've kind of built it. If I kind of look at the Dolphins as like a 2-year kind of reload, if you don't want to use the word rebuild, that's the way I think about it at. And I'd rather see them be able to use that first round pick at a defensive spot, because you need a starting linebacker, you need a cornerback, and you really are going to be needing a defensive end soon, because you got 2 guys on the other side of 30. So if you look at it from that point of view, knowing that they believe in their coach and they think he's going to be here for a while, they think he's going to be the right guy, that's probably the mode they'd like to go. But if Elliott drops in their lap and there really isn't that cornerback or even that defensive end, and they think it's too early for Ragland or what have you, then they may go that route and change of plans, and then we'll see what happens with the rest of the picks.
That's a great point, Ron. I mean, as I think back from all the years I've watched the team, it's rare. I mean, maybe only second to the quarterback where you see a drafted corner come in and just do very, very well, be like a Pro Bowl caliber corner. I mean, in the Dolphins' history, maybe somebody like Troy Vincent was able to do somewhat close to that, but it's rare. Whereas running backs, you see rookie running backs, lighting the league up all the time. I mean, that's not an uncommon occurrence at all. So it is a very good point that it's going to take more often than not, it's going to take a season or two to develop a corner, whereas you can draft your running back and just basically insert him in the lineup in a lot of cases, and that could affect their draft strategy. One player. While we're on the topic of defensive backs, people are asking about is Leon Hall, and obviously he's a veteran corner. He's been in the league for a while. He's probably I don't know exactly his age. I want to say he's early 30s. Been around the league a little bit. He was on the Bengals, so obviously the coaching staff probably has a little bit of familiarity with him. I'm trying to think. Was he on the Rams last year? Do you know off the top of your head who he played for last year, Ron? Leon Hall.
I thought it was the Bengals. I thought he was actually.
Oh, was it the Bengals last year? That could be. Um, yeah, I think that is right. He was on the Bengals last year. That's right. So you would think, I'm actually looking it up right now, and he was on the Bengals last year. So um, you would think the Vance Joseph would know him really well. So if Miami were going to make a move on him, they would know. I don't like getting past 30 corners. I mean, right now at this point in the game of free agency, we beggars can't be choosers, if you will. There's not going to be much out there, but I don't know that adding Leon Hall would greatly impact what we'd want to do on our day one starters or not. What's your opinion on him?
Well, I mean, he's had 2 Achilles injuries since I don't know, 07, 08. And he just had I don't know if you knew this, but he just had well, not just had, he had back surgery right after the season started. I think some kind of ruptured disc or something to that effect. And so injured disc, I should say, officially. So it's why he's still out on the market is really just those two things, especially the back surgery, and he's 31 years old or something close to that. Uh, I don't mind adding him there, but I feel like if you add him because they couldn't get a drafted position and they were like, okay, we're going to start him, you're just going to have to see how that works out because it may not work out great, or it may. But last year's Ron would have been like, all right, we got Leon Hall. He's a vet. He's going to be great. We got it. We got it covered. We got Maxwell. We got Hall. We're going to put Bobby McCain at the nickel cornerback spot. We're good to go. And then the season starts and 1, 2, or 3 of those guys, none of them end up working out. I mean, that's all a possibility. So this year's Ron would be hesitant to be excited about that move, but it doesn't mean they won't make it if the draft comes and goes for this year. I mean, they're still trying to compete this year, regardless of what their 2, 3, 4-year plan is. They're still trying to put as much talent as they can on the team this year without sacrificing the rest the rest of the season, without sacrificing the salary cap for the seasons to come, without sacrificing the draft for seasons to come, which is why you saw them start off straight away with that Kiko Alonso Byron Maxwell trade, because it was a trade that only cost them 5 positions in the draft to probably trade down to a guy, whoever it is they're targeting, they're still going to want and they feel like they can get. And it didn't cost them any future picks. It was kind of a trade-off with the money, but you got a 2-for-1 deal there. And then you saw him go after C.J. Anderson again, a move that would not have cost him any kind of compensatory pick. And it was a move that was going to be some money, but not quite as much money as they would have spent on Miller. So you see them continuously making these moves to try and improve the team as much as they can for 2016 without mortgaging the future, something we're not used to seeing from the Dolphins of recent years. So I give them an A for effort and for creativity. They're doing some pretty good things to try their best to do it. It just doesn't mean that they're all going to work out for 2016, but for me, this rebuild is a couple years, especially on the defensive side. So we're going to have to see how it goes. I'm cutting them some slack for this year. I really am. I think that they've done a fantastic job of trying to put themselves in the best position they can and still look out for the future of the team.
Yeah, that's a great synopsis of what they've been doing, because I absolutely agree they're not attempting to do a rebuild. If this team was attempting to rebuild, they absolutely would not be keeping Cameron Wake under contract, even if they weren't going to use that money in free agency, because you can roll those dollars over. And so it would make a lot more sense to let somebody like Cameron Wake go, who's an injury risk, and just say, we want to take his salary and have that for the future years when we're going to really make our run at it. I believe the team still is looking at competing for a playoff spot. I don't know that they're realistically thinking they're a Super Bowl contender, but they've only been to the playoffs once in like the last 15 years. So I think right now step one is let's just try to get a structured team in place. We'll get our coaching staff we feel good with, and let's just try to get this team back to being a competitive playoff contender year in and year out. And the teams that do that, it's amazing if you look at the teams who have been awarded the compensation picks. Like one of the number one teams is the Baltimore Ravens, and that is a team that, for the most part, year in and year out, they've been a playoff contending team. And I don't think that this is the team, deciding to rebuild and give up. I think it's just a complete change in philosophy where they've decided to put value on players. And if teams are overplaying for that value, they're going to let him go. I mean, the team could have clearly had C.J. Anderson if they really, really wanted him, and we're going to take the approach, we are going to get him no matter what. They could have just paid him $2 or $3 more million, and I highly doubt the Broncos would have matched it. But they also looked at C.J. Anderson and said, yeah, he's a better running back than we have on our roster to split time with Ajayi, but he's only worth this much money, and we're not going to overpay for a player that a year or two from now just puts us in a worse salary cap position. So to me, I'm hoping that it's like a bigger picture. They're correcting the course of a lot of mistakes they've made where they've overpaid players consistently for years. I mean, Greg Jennings was a perfect example of that last year. They could obviously go out and get players like that this year, but Greg Jennings counted 1.5 million in dead cap space against the cap this year, and he did very little last year to really improve the team. And so I think they're taking that philosophy. We're just not going to do that anymore. We're not going to go maybe sign a guy like Leon Hall unless it's like a real affordable 1-year deal. Otherwise, they're just going to roll with Bobby McCain because I think they're starting to realize that by the end of this year, even Bobby McCain will probably be a better player than Leon Hall, just because Leon Hall's body, the chances of it holding together for a whole season and staying healthy, it's probably not going to happen. But there's a real good chance that Bobby McCain will stay healthy, and the experience that he gets throughout this year will make him a lot better player for the Dolphins in the long run.
Yeah, I agree, and you made a good point. It's something I didn't think about. Leon Hall is really more just a slot cornerback. He's not even really a boundary guy. So even if you sign him, I mean, if you take him like we did with Bryce McCain and force him out to the boundary when he's really not that anymore, I mean, it's 2015 all over again. I feel like I've repeated that phrase a few times over the past few months, but in this scenario, that really would be just 2015 all over again. Just same storyline, different names. So
Yeah, and even 2014. I mean, that's what Cortland Finnegan was. I mean, I liked Cortland Finnegan, his tenacity in his career, but by the time he came to the Dolphins, the reality was he just wasn't going to hold up for a whole year. And so that to me, that's the same thing. Last year we brought Bryce McCain in, who we probably overpaid for what his caliber of play was. He's just an average sort of player, and to me, that's probably what Leon Hall is. So, I mean, if they were to sign Leon Hall, I don't think it would be until after the draft, and I would hope it would only be in this scenario that they just want to put a more of a low cost veteran in with some of the younger players to help them along, but not really counting on him to be a starting defensive back throughout the majority of the season.
Well, I know I said this last week, but for anybody who wasn't listening or didn't hear, that's the same thing. After May 10th, any player, any free agent you pick up will no longer take away any compensatory picks for next year. So then it's just fair game on everybody for any teams that are trying not to sign player A or B or C because they don't want to lose a compensatory pick. Then all bets are off at that point, and you can go get whoever you want, and there's no cost of your comp picks for next year, which I don't think as as a Miami Dolphin fan, and certainly as a podcaster talking about the Miami Dolphins, I've never said the words compensatory pick as many times in my life as I have over the past month. And except to say I didn't really even know what they were because I was a Miami Dolphin fan and we never had them.
Yeah, no, and that's just because we've taken the approach so often of signing in the free agents and chasing the best free agents on the market, and in the long run, it didn't really pay off for us. And you can look back this year and just see, in a sense, kind of the foolishness of it. I mean, I look back and say, if we had not signed Greg Jennings last year, and we just kept all of his salary last year to roll over to this year, and we didn't have his 1.5 million in dead money this year, that's probably the differential to get Lamar Miller signed. And instead we got to watch Lamar Miller walk because he's being paid heavily by another team. And you start to think about that, and you're like, man, wouldn't it have been better to not sign Greg Jennings and just gave Lamar Miller an early contract last year and locked him up for 3 or 4 more years? So I think it's more of a philosophy now that we're not going to sign a lot of these mid-range, if you will, veterans to our team because we need to start thinking about maybe in 2017, we got to look at giving Jarvis Landry a 4-year deal before he becomes a free agent, hits the market, and other players like that. So to me, it's long term over the next 2 to 3 years. It's being smarter, and that it goes along right with what you're saying, Ron. They have a lot of faith in Gase, and so I think they're trying to look at giving him a team to develop over the next 2 to 3 years. They definitely aren't taking the approach we're going. This is not the Denver Bronco approach, if you will. We're going all in right now, but I do like the approach because you can't argue that what we have been doing definitely has not been working. I mean, we just have not been. It just hasn't been very many years where we've even had a chance to make the playoffs by the last game of the season. And I at a minimum want to see that. I want the last game to be meaningful when you get there at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, I think it was more meaningful for the Patriots because they lost than it was because we won, sadly to say in that case. But hey, they didn't have the home field advantage. They lost to Denver. You could blame it on the fact that we beat them. You could blame it on the fact that Bill Belichick went in with like, this is a practice game, so we're going to just let the Brady throw the ball 4 times in the first half. Oh, whoops. And, oh, yeah, this is actually an NFL team, the Dolphins, even though they had 5 wins at the time. You could blame it on the fact that he elected to kick off during overtime on the Jets game, but I like to think it was the Dolphins who cost the Patriots the Super Bowl this year. I can at least pretend that was the reason.
Well, they contributed to it. I watched that game, and I don't believe the Patriots were. I mean, they wanted to win the game, obviously, for the home field advantage, but I don't think they were going all in to try to win it. I think their goal was to formulate a game plan so that they could get into the playoffs in as healthy a shape as possible, and so they were trying to minimize injury in that game. So I think they were hoping that they could just run the ball and Miami would just lay down if they physically ran the ball. And when that didn't happen, they ended up costing the game and ultimately the playoff position to make it to the Super Bowl, which really didn't break my heart at all, to be honest. I've had enough of the Patriots winning. I think pretty much the whole NFL has had enough of the Patriots other than the Patriots fans. But that's just my take.
Yeah. Chad, I'd actually like to ask you a question. How are you feeling about this year's D line? We've really traded out Olivier Vernon for Williams, but beyond that, it is the same line really. Let's just pretend that Wake is going to be healthy and good to go week 1. What do you how do you think it'll go? And I know we've had the addition of a new D line coach that we were seeking for a couple months. So just based off all those things, where do you think we're at there? Because it didn't perform very well last year.
Well, I personally, I'm not too concerned about the defensive line. I think that Miami has been running that scheme for a few years now where we have run defensive ends that are designed to rush the quarterback first and then stop the run second. And so Cameron Wake and Olivier Vernon both are not very big defensive ends. They're very good at rushing the passer, but you could kind of move them around in the running game. And, unfortunately, a couple of years ago in that close Denver game, the Broncos figured that out. They figured out that the way to beat the Dolphins defense was just pound the ball at our defensive ends. Don't give our defensive ends a chance to really get into the rush the passer. And that proved to be effective. And so coming into this year, even if we'd had Olivier Vernon back and Cameron Wake healthy, we needed to address how are we going to stop the run with undersized defensive ends if teams just keep pounding the ball at them. And, last year they tried to address that by working guys in like Derek Shelby who were bigger guys and better at setting the edge and stopping the run. But we need some every down guys that can do that. And I strongly believe that Mario Williams, the guy is an absolute beast. I mean, if you haven't just look him up on Google and look at what he looks like. I mean, he's a monster. And he's a guy, if you remember Tyson Clabo, he literally just slammed Tyson Clabo into Ryan Tannehill a couple years ago when we lost to Buffalo. He just bull rushed him. And I start to think about putting Mario Williams beside Ndamukong Suh in some formations. That's a nightmare scenario for some offensive line because if you have a Dallas Thomas or a Jason Fox at guard and they line up Mario Williams and Ndamukong Suh on you, it's going to be a long day for your running game and your quarterback because of their just physical ability to dominate with both power and quickness. Now, as a whole, the most important player this year, obviously, Ndamukong Suh is going to show up, and he's going to be a good player. Cameron Wake, I believe, is going to get back. I don't think he'll ever again be an every down defensive end though for the Dolphins. I think they're going to kind of reformulate him to be a pass rush specialist, and so you're going to see a lot of Cameron Wake playing this year when it's third and long or second long in games
In
where teams obviously have to throw.
in obvious passing situations is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm gonna say because one is they don't want to overwork him. One because of his age, and two he's coming off a severe injury, and three that's what he's elite at. He's one of the best they've ever had at putting his hand in the dirt, coming off the snap and rushing the quarterback. So let him do that. Whenever you get in third long, put a fresh Cameron Wake in the game and let him attack the quarterback. He may be able to do that for another 2 or 3 years of his career and do it very effectively. But if it's not him, what I think they're going to do is you're going to see a lot of Mario Williams playing defensive end instead of Cameron Wake in there because he's very difficult to handle with Ndamukong Suh. But again, I feel confident Mario Williams is going to bounce back. I know Ndamukong Suh is going to be good, and I know Cameron Wake's going to be able to rush the passer. The player that I'm most intrigued about is Jordan Phillips. The guy has a ton of talent. He definitely showed his ability to be a guy that can penetrate gaps and be disruptive in the backfield. But
in passing situations.
Yeah, but he would
in
disappear
running
in other
situations, oh my God, he just gets bull rushed. He's just gone. He's hard. I won't say horrible. He did not perform well last year in running situations against the run. He just was not good, and I'm sure he'd be the first to tell you that.
No, and my personal opinion is he just needs to be in better shape. He looks to me like he needs to be doing what Ndamukong Suh is doing in the offseason. And I hope I haven't seen him in the any of the OTA stuff yet, but I'm hoping he has just been living in the weight room, going crazy, trying to get his strength up, trying to get his percent body fat down, because I think from the talent standpoint, for the amount of quickness he has for his size, he could really progress forward and become a Pro Bowl level D tackle. And if he does that, then they're going to have the ability to dominate some interior with Suh. Now, I like the fact they kept Earl Mitchell because he gives us an insurance policy just in case, Jordan Phillips kind of flops a little bit. He doesn't come in shape, and he's more basically the same player he was last year. Because Earl Mitchell is a solid player. He's never going to be a dominant defensive tackle, but he gives us, a quality third D tackle to work into that rotation. So I feel like we're okay at the defensive tackle spot. This will be a big year for Jordan Phillips, though, because if he flops, we'll probably be looking at another defensive tackle next year to play alongside Ndamukong Suh. At the end, that's going to be the big question mark. I know the initial thought is Mario Williams will just play the right defensive end and Cameron Wake would play the left. But, as I was saying earlier, I don't think that's the plan. I think Cameron Wake's going to be limited on the number of snaps they give him. So the real question is, are they going to get a defensive end in this draft that can come in and play? Is Dion Jordan going to come back, and is he going to be that guy that can work in to be the next defensive end? Because he clearly has the talent, but who knows, where he's at. And then finally, what's going to happen with Terrence Fede? I believe Terrence Fede is going to replace Derek Shelby in the rotation of kind of being that third to fourth defensive end that works in and out, but isn't a starting guy. But he does have a quality first step and has the athletic ability to rush the passer, but he had a ways to go. So anyway, I know that's a long answer covering the whole defensive line I see as a whole, but those are the primary players I think that are going to be in the mix, and I think there's probably going to be one more added. And I know there's also I'm trying to remember if his name is Demetrius Moore.
Yes,
he's an interesting player.
I'm very intrigued by him. Very intrigued, but to see what he does. Plus, we added, and I don't know his name at all. We added the CFL player.
Oh yeah. I remember. I can't remember his name either, but I know who you're talking about into the mix. So, but whether or not any of those guys are your starting defensive end that can get some heat on the passer and replace Olivier Vernon, that's hard to say right now. I suspect they'll add one more defensive end in that mix yet, probably through the draft, but I don't think he's going to be a high round pick. It'll probably be more of a third, fourth round guy.
Okay. All right. I do have a question for you. If Cam Wake is not an every down guy and he's just passing situations or pass rush specialist, that really means he's kind of not on a lot of 1st and 10, especially when the game is close or the beginning of the game. He's not really in there. So who's in there opposite of Mario Williams? I mean, who's the guy?
Well, that's what I mean. I think they're going to add a guy yet to play in that right, and a lot of it is what do you have with Dion Jordan? That's why I was expressing my frustration earlier. Is he a guy that you can even consider potentially being there from a talent standpoint? So you can say, well, let's see what happens with him this year, and we'll keep Fede and Moore in that mix over there as well. But I view Wake as being more of a Charles Haley type player, maybe the last 2 or 3 years of his career, where his job is to just rush the passer. He's not going to be a big time every down defensive end defending the run, but I've definitely been wrong before. But right now it looks like we have a caller. Go ahead and identify yourself, caller.
Hey, this is Tony calling in.
Hey, Tony, how you doing?
Not bad. How about yourself, guys? I'm in Illinois on business. So actually, I'm calling y'all guys from Illinois here. But been on Twitter and saw the show was on tonight. So I said, let me give the guys a call. I didn't get a chance to call last week. So obviously, I heard y'all guys talking about the D line. one guy that you hadn't mentioned as far as playing early downs when Cam is on the sideline is obviously the dude they signed here a few weeks ago, Andre Branch, the kid they signed from Jacksonville. He's being looked at primarily as a run down guy, and like you said, using Cam as a pass rush specialist, and that's been my thought with Cam here as well. I mean, he's going to be, like I said, 34, coming off a torn Achilles, which is a difficult injury to come off of, and I mean, I agree with the sentiment y'all mentioned a few minutes ago about Cam being a pass rush specialist, sort of like Arizona is using Dwight Freeney right now. I just don't see Cam being an every down player anymore, coming off of that type of injury. So the D line for Miami is going to be interesting. I still think they're going to look to draft possibly a DN or a D tackle. The kid from Brigham Young, Bronson, uh, Kofusi. I'm probably butchering the kid's name, but he's like 6'6", 285. He's got great size. He's got nice quickness for a man his size. He's played in the 4-3 scheme. He's played at DN, and he's played at D tackle inside as well on passing downs. Right now, I'm seeing a third or fourth round grade on him, but from what I'm reading, he's one of those type kids. He's got a nonstop motor. His coach is actually his dad at Brigham Young, so the kid has been coached hard. There's a lot to like about him, and he's probably going to be overdrafted. So any team that probably wants him is going to probably need to take him. I'm reading in the second or third round, but I know he's a kid that Miami has looked at and Miami likes. But I've also read and heard y'all guys probably have also that Miami's interested in bringing back C.J. Mosley at D tackle. So the defensive front is going to be interesting. The situation with Dion is going to be interesting. I think, obviously, you hope Dion doesn't turn into what's the kid from Cleveland?
Josh Gordon.
The wide receiver, Josh Gordon. You hope he don't turn into a Josh Gordon type situation, which is, unfortunate for him. But I mean, Josh Gordon can't let it go. So he's about to get himself out of the league. He's about to ruin his own career, which I don't feel much sympathy for him in that situation. I mean, you got a chance to set yourself and your family for life, and you decide to keep messing with the Mary Jane and keep drinking and keep failing drug tests, and that's on him. So, but the D line for Miami is going to be interesting to see how it shapes out. I do think they're going to look to bring in another defensive end. Possibly defensive tackle. So we'll see where that goes. Have y'all guys sort of talked about what Miami's looking to possibly do here in the first round with the first round pick? Have y'all mentioned that? Because I sort of read a little bit about what y'all were going to possibly discuss tonight.
Yeah, we touched on it, Tony, and what we were mentioning is this last week at the mock drafts, the popularity of Elliott's been starting to go up. That if he's there, that's obviously a big if. If he falls to 13, Miami's going to go out and get Elliott. And so what we were talking about is both Ron and I agree that Miami's biggest need is to get another defensive back, but our alternative thought was there's a huge drop off after Elliott in terms of running back talent, but you might be able to get a defensive back in the second round. In particular, Miami, they have a higher second round pick than you realize because they've fallen back to the 13 in the first round, but they have a high second round pick. And so we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were talking about, does a guy like Eli Apple fall that far, or Willie Jackson fall that far? And we're just trying to decide, if you get a guy like that, how much differential is it from a guy like Hargreaves, in the first round? And because there's a clear talent differential at the running back position, so we were kind of like throwing around that idea of is it Elliott or is it a defensive back? Those are clearly the two favorites right now. And Iran is also keeping keep an eye out for Conklin, the offensive lineman, because he's a guy that could play both guard or tackle. So he could potentially come in, fill a guard spot, and then slide over to tackle maybe in a year or two if BA retires at that point. But those were the names we were throwing around. You have a favorite right now at the 13th spot?
Well, I mean, I agree with your sentiment. I mean, if Zeke makes it to 13, I think he's the pick. I don't think either Eli, Apple, or especially William Jackson get out of the first round. I think Pittsburgh has been looking at the kid. They're very interested. Pittsburgh has been doing a lot of work in regards to DBs. I think those two will go in the late first round if Miami doesn't grab one of them at number 13. I think the kid that they're more interested in, and I mean, this is just my thoughts, but I'm thinking they like William Jackson a little more than Eli Apple. At number 13, if Zeke is off the board, Conklin I think could be a scenario if they look to trade down, which they could. They could possibly think we could trade down a couple of spots and still get Apple and or William Jackson and pick up an additional pick, which they possibly could. Um, Man, I'm starting to think more and more Philadelphia is pretty serious about getting a quarterback. I mean, you don't send your whole scouting department and the team owner and everybody out to see quarterback workouts like they've done here with the two top kids, the golf kid and Wentz from North Dakota State. So, I mean, I think Philly's going to look to try to get a quarterback. And also, Dallas has been mentioned with Zeke, but I do think they're going to probably go Bosa and or, if he's there, Jalen Ramsey at number 4. And I've seen some mocks where they've had Dallas taking the kid from Alabama, Derrick Henry, with their pick in the second round. So, I mean, to me, those two teams are the ones in the top 10. I mean, I've heard some possibilities with the Giants. But I think there's a chance that Zeke could get there. I'm still, you still kind of hesitant to get your hopes up extremely high. But if he does get to Miami at number 13, I think he's the pick. But if he doesn't get to 13, I think Miami could look to trade down to maybe gain a pick and still look to get Eli, Apple, or William Jackson. And I think right now, their preference is William Jackson. If it goes into the second round, I've heard a lot and seen a lot of Miami being tied to the kid from Baylor. Xavier, I think it's Xavier Howard is the young man from Baylor.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Possibly along with the kid from Miami, Artie Burns, although, it seems to vary a little bit with Artie. I mean, I've read as high as the second, I've read third round with him, but I know Miami has talked with him. I think they just took him out to dinner here this week earlier or last week. So they've got interested in Artie. And I think besides McKenzie and the Hargraves kid, most of the DBs that Miami has looked at have been 6 foot or bigger. I think there are a couple other kids that are in that 5'11" range, but I think what you're seeing with Miami is they definitely are looking towards the bigger DBs. And someone made a valid point. If Miami was all gung ho about getting Vernon Hargraves, they wouldn't have made that trade with Philly to move down from number 8 to number 13. I think they're happy with getting him if he drops to 13, which I don't think he will. But I think Miami's looking at bigger corners. I really do. So the first round, there's still so much going on with that. But I like your guy said, I think it's going to be either Zeke if he gets there, or I think it's going to be one of those two corners. And I'm leaning towards William Jackson.
I agree with that sentiment that they moved back, because I think that at the very least the Dolphins have determined that I think it's obvious they have no chance at Ramsey. I think he's going to be one of the first 2 or 3 picks off the board. And once he's gone, I don't think there's a huge differential between, Hargraves, McKenzie, and even when you're talking about guys like Xavier Halliard, William Jackson, Eli Apple, you have your guy you like, but I think they realized there's a lot of corners that are close that are going to be available, so there was no reason for them to set up there at 8. And I also don't think they've been targeting Elliott because that's why they made the move for CJ Anderson. But you haven't really been seeing them chase the free agent defensive backs. And I think that's because they've been planning on targeting them in the draft. But I do believe, you're right. The Eagles have been looking at quarterback. And I was talking to Ron earlier. I'm like, you are going to be surprised, in my opinion, that this draft is going to have some fireworks at chasing quarterbacks. Because I can tell you right now, I almost could guarantee the Rams desperately want a quarterback because they're going into the LA market. They want to establish themselves there. They're competing with the Lakers. They're competing with the Dodgers. They're potentially competing with the Raiders or even the Chargers in a year or two in that market, and they want a franchise quarterback bad. They are not wanting to go into the season with Foles, the quarterback, and so the Rams are going to be getting nervous because you're starting to see teams like the Eagles talk about quarterbacks. The Saints are talking about quarterbacks. You don't know what the Browns are going to do. You got Elway with the Broncos, you think the Broncos are going to go through this year with Mark Sanchez? I mean, you got to be kidding me if that's their plan. And so the Broncos might make a stunning trade and try to jump up there to get one of those quarterbacks. And so, or if they trade for Kaepernick, then the 49ers have a high pick. They're right up there in the mix. And so I think these teams like the Rams and the Jets, those teams desperately need quarterbacks right now. And I think these other teams that are like kind of entering into the mix, like a team like the Saints, who might say, well, we have Drew Brees, but we're just going to pull the trigger and take Paxton Lynch this year too and have him be our quarterback of the future. That's devastating to a team like the Rams or the Jets. And that's going to make them pay up, I think, to get up there. And that can absolutely work to the Dolphins' advantage, either in getting players like Elliott or Hargraves to fall to Miami, or even one of those teams deciding to trade with Miami and let Miami just fall back and maybe still get their guy in an extra pick or two.
Yeah, I think if Miami is going to be working with a team in regards to trading for a quarterback, I can see it easily being the Rams trading up to get like a Paxton Lynch, just to ensure that they get him. Because, like you said, I do agree with you. The Rams desperately want to get a quarterback, and the Rams have a ton of talent on that team. I mean, for them to be where they are now with the ammunition that they've had and the picks that they've had, I mean, I don't know if that's an indictment on Jeff Fisher. I mean, I think Jeff Fisher is a good coach, but I don't think he's as hot to trot as maybe he's been put out to be. But for that team to have the amount of talent that they have and to be under 500, I mean, it boggles the mind. And for Foles to struggle the way he did this past year with that team, it makes you wonder what's going on. But they've got to get the answer at quarterback. That's the missing piece for that team as far as talent. So I agree with you. I mean, there's going to be a lot of buzz, a lot of activity going on. Now, we've seen this before, a lot of bluster and talk, and then once we get to the draft, nothing goes on for the most part. But this could be interesting this year. All of a sudden, you didn't talk about Cleveland, not looking to take a quarterback possibly at number 2, and because Connor Cook could easily get to them. I mean, they've got the second pick in the draft, so they can get Connor Cook at the top of the second round if they want to get a quarterback to develop. Cleveland got a lot of hope. So
they're in a tough spot. Cleveland always, because they did the Brandon Whedon and Johnny Manziel back end of the second round. I guess those are both first round guys, but it historically has failed for the Browns to not just pull the trigger on the top 1 or 2 rated quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was going to say too, I think that I really truly feel Cleveland's going to draft a quarterback. That's just my personal opinion. But let's say we get past Cleveland's pick and they don't take a quarterback. Let's say Tennessee goes simple and they go Tunzel, and then Ramsey goes off to Cleveland. If you get past Dallas and no quarterback has been drafted yet, it's going to get crazy. That's when your scenario, Chad, of everybody starts trying to jockey for position for quarterbacks. I think that's when you're going to see tons of action possibly happen if we get past those 4 picks and we haven't seen a quarterback come off the board yet. That's my personal opinion. That'll be real exciting if it happens, because I'll get my popcorn ready if pick 4 comes and goes for Dallas and no quarterback has gone yet. It will get exciting then.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be total chaos at that point.
Mm-hmm. It'll be, and that's where even that can then it be an advantage to Miami. I think if it plays out the way it's going to play out, the only advantage to Miami is if you can see 3 quarterbacks go before it gets to Miami's pick. It pushes better players to Miami and gives them more choices of guys they like. Maybe pushes Elliott there. Maybe pushes even Hargraves there. Maybe Lawson if they want to go defensive end, which again, it looks like we need a defensive end. If you really want to have Wake be a pass rushing specialist, then you need a starter, not just not talking a guy to rotate in. You need a starting defensive end. And right now that guy is not on this team. So, it's either Wake, playing more than he should play, doing some things that maybe he's not as good at doing, especially playing against the run, setting the edge, or it's drafting, or you're just making do with some kind of, you know, dented can free agent. And then we're looking at another kind of hole this year, unless Wake can hold up, to the beating and play three downs, which I don't know if he can do that all year long this year, honestly.
I don't think you want to put a 34-year-old coming off a torn Achilles in and have him be an every down guy. I just don't think that would be wise. I'm gonna throw a name out there that I like a little bit more than Shaq Lawson. I really do like the kid Kevin Dodd. I mean, he hadn't played as much ball as Lawson, but I think his ceiling is much higher, and his production this past year with Clemson was just as good as Lawson. And you talking about a kid that's 6'5", 278, 280, and moves the way he does and uses his hands the way he does. The kid Kevin Dodd is somebody I like, and I've seen him mocked to Miami earlier during the process. And I think
in the second round, Tony, you saw him in the second round or the first?
First round. Wow, round with Kevin Dodd.
He's not really grading out right now as far as most of the predictions. Of course, we can all take those predictions and put them where, because what do they really mean once the actual draft starts? But I don't know if that's a super valuable pick. Again, if they like the guy, they like the guy. It is what it is. But I think a dream scenario would be able to get, a cornerback in the first round, and then in the second round, we have a high pick in the second round. It's number 8. Officially, it's really number 7, because you're taking the Patriots pick and just throwing it in the trash. Nobody gets it. So officially, it's kind of number 7 in the second round, and then get Dodd. I would much rather see that scenario. I'd feel a lot more comfortable that maybe we even got 2 starters in the first 2 rounds and 2 holes on our defensive side. I don't know about you guys, but if that happened, I'd feel a lot better than if we had to ended up taking Dodd in the first round at 13.
That'd be same as you said before, Ron. That would be a success. I mean, that'd be a big win for the Dolphins if they went through that scenario. I would think. I think we mentioned a little bit earlier that this team appears to be changing not the type of defense they run, but the type of players they're going to run in it. And I think the days of Miami getting a 260-pound defensive end that can attack the quarterback is not going to be happening. I think they're going to be looking at guys that are more in the 280, 285 range to play defensive end. And I think the same thing at corner, especially the boundary corners anyway. I don't think you're going to see, the coil 5'9" defensive backs playing on the boundary. I think you're going to be seeing the 5'11", 6-foot cornerbacks. And so kind of knowing that, you can kind of tell that if you look at the players in the draft, that's probably what they're going to be looking at are the bigger defensive ends and the bigger corners. And I think they're intending to use, that was one of the reasons they made that trade, is they're intending to use their linebackers to attack a little bit more. So they're probably going to be maybe blitzing somebody like Kiko Alonso a little bit more, and not relying on like guys like Cam Wake and Olivier Vernon to put that heat on the passer. They want to shut that running game down, so they're getting bigger players for both directions for that. They're getting bigger corners and bigger ends to help support the run, and then they're going to use linebackers to attack more. So that's the template I'm expecting them to follow in the draft.
I'd like to see them become a better tackling team regardless. And I do see the point in what Tony was definitely saying. We are targeting bigger corners, but not necessarily press guys. Like when we had Vontae and we had Sean Smith, they were bigger, but they were press guys. These are still zone guys, just 6'1" zone guys. So it's really a different type of cornerback. But in essence, I'm assuming and thinking that makes us more physical, better against the run, and a better tackling defense. Because right now, overall, we have quite a few poor tacklers on the team. We have a poor tackling defense right now because of that.
Well, let's go ahead and sort of clear up a misconception here. Even though Miami's going to be playing zone with this unit, as far as this defense, they are looking for corners that can press as well. They're going to be doing a lot of press coverage with these guys as well. Xavier Howard is a kid that does a lot of press coverage. William Jackson does a lot of press coverage, but he's also good in off-man coverage as well. I think that's what to me gives him an advantage of Apple. But Eli Apple is a guy that's good in press coverage too. But Miami's looking for bigger corners, but they're looking for bigger corners that can come up and do press coverage as well.
Well, they'd be starting from scratch on that then, because we know from last year compared to the year before, Byron Maxwell is not a press cornerback, and I don't think that all 5'9" of Bobby McCain is probably much of a press cornerback either. So if that's the case, then you're talking about you need 2 to 3 guys to make that happen. So I mean, it's going to be hard to say that maybe they want to do that. Like they've also talked about wanting to eventually transition to a little bit more 3-4, but the personnel's not there. So maybe very well Advanced Joseph wants to do that, but right now his personnel does not speak to playing that style.
I think the problem with that is it depends on who you're playing. I mean, obviously the old school press corner where the Jimmy Johnson defense, if you will, where they would bring in guys and just play man-to-man press all game. You can't do it anymore in today's NFL because of the rule changes with where you can make contact. And if you run press coverage for the majority of the game in today's NFL, you're going to see so much yellow flags on the field that you'll end up not succeeding. However,
well, I mean,
what I was going to say is it's tough because in the division you probably don't want to press guys like Brandon Marshall, Julio Jones, AJ Green, before he retired, Calvin Johnson. These big, fast wide receivers, they're so physically dominating and so fast. You need these big corners that can run with them down the field. But if you get up tight and press them, good luck. However, we still got to match up with the Patriots. And I believe the only way you can play the Patriots is to play press the majority of the game because they are so good at reading zones and doing those quick little 5-yard outs and slants. They'll just do that to you all game long. And unless you step up, attack the quarterback, and put your corners in man-to-man press coverage, the Patriots just methodically, go down the field on you. So I think they're thinking we've got to have guys that can press, but I don't think that's going to definitely be their primary scheme. They're still going to be playing a lot more zone.
Well, I mean that's the point that I think it's been missing. I mean, if you watch the Bengals don't play all press coverage. They don't. I mean, I think they probably play about 30% press coverage from time to time. I mean, I'm not saying Miami's looking for corners that are going to get out there, like you said, and play press coverage like Jimmy did when he had, or like when we had Sean and we had Vontae. But, the ability to press is something that they want to look for because, like you said, against the New England that, does a lot of stuff in regards to quick routes, timing routes. The way that you give them issues is you disrupt their timing. There's not a team out there that plays exclusively press coverage. Even Seattle doesn't do that. But I think they're looking for cornerbacks that have the ability to provide press coverages from time to time when you don't want to disrupt the rhythm of a team that's a rhythm pass and attack, like say in Atlanta, or within division, like you said, New England and the quick stuff that they do. So. I mean, I've read that that's what Miami's looking at, and if you look at the corners that they're looking at, I mean, they're looking for guys that can do press coverage, and not with the thought of doing press coverage 70-80% of the time, because that's not going to be the case. But I think they want a bigger guy that has the ability to press, but that can run as well, like William Jackson or like the kid Artie Burns. Artie Burns can run for a kid as big as he is. So. I can see Miami drafting 2 corners in this particular in this draft. Just because they get one in the first round, I think they're going to look to get one probably mid to late in the draft as well. I see Miami looking to get multiple corners. So
we've had the best luck, Tony, when we've done that in the past too. When we've doubled up on cornerback, seems like we've had the best luck in finding not just 1, 2 ones. I mean, I always point to the Vontae Davis, Sean Smith. I have to say I wasn't a podcaster at the time that we drafted those guys, but I was very excited, and I wasn't a podcaster when we got rid of those guys, and I was extremely angry. And we did it all for a stupid scheme that didn't even work from, and a poor coaching staff that couldn't make it work even if it was a good scheme. We sent away some really good talent. Yeah, Vontae had his issues and he was a little mature, what have you. But I mean, those were 2 good guys. We were set on the boundary at cornerback, set. And because we got a good value on one, because Indy will always overtrade with you, and the other guy, he's just too big. We want little guys. It still angers me to this day, because beyond Brent Grimes, where have we really felt solid at the other cornerback positions? We haven't, and we've struggled ever since. And that's what happens when you wipe out a position like that, all together at pretty much the same time, which is what we did.
Yeah.
You're going to struggle to try and replace two guys like that. And yes, Vontae Davis and Sean Smith weren't Patrick Surtain and Sam Madison, but they were, Patrick Surtain and Sam Madison light, at least. It's better than what we've been doing, even with just having one good cornerback, yes, but it hasn't been enough for us. So it's just a little annoying every time I think about it, to be honest with you.
Oh, without a doubt. Like you said, I mean, even if they weren't all pro, which I think Vontae was a Pro Bowler this year, or all pro corner this year. I mean, he's turned into everything that Indy thought he would be for him. And Sean is
Sean has been a sought after free agent. Now this is his third contract. He had the rookie contract with us, but this is his second big free agent contract. He's been sought after twice. So tell me, I mean, both these guys are pretty much not perennial Pro Bowlers, but at least borderline second team, quote unquote, if you will, Pro Bowl type guys. They really are that kind of talent. And we just whisked them away for moronic reasons, in my opinion. And now we have to try and figure this out, because Philbin and Coyle made poor decisions on that, and Jeff Ireland as well. And Jeff Ireland was the one who drafted him, and he's actually drafted some pretty good DBs. If you look at a lot of his defensive backfield and some of the guys he's drafted, that might be the best position he was able to analyze and draft. But unfortunately, he made poor decisions on getting rid of him, along with Philbin.
Well,
it's what Philbin wanted, and it was more for Philbin. When you get a coach, you want to get players for their scheme. That's the way it works. So I'm going to blame Philbin and Coyle more than I'm going to blame Ireland for that.
Yeah, well, exactly in regards to Philbin. I mean, Philbin was just one of those guys. He didn't want so-called, unquote, troublemakers. And obviously Vontae had just maturity issues, which I think could have obviously been straightened out. But Philbin he didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want to deal with Brandon Marshall, so he traded him. I mean, he just didn't want to deal with players he thought were trouble players. He doesn't need to be a head coach. Just point blank. He's a position coach. He doesn't relate to players well at all. And obviously, unfortunately for us Dolphins fans, we found out the hard way about that situation. So, I thought Jeff Ireland had some pretty nice drafts for Miami. I just thought the wrong coaching staffs had been in place trying to develop talent. And that's the thing that excites me about Gase and this staff. I believe they are going to do a much better job of developing talent, which you don't think you have to still develop talent once they get to the pros, but that's far from the case. I mean, you still got to develop these guys. You still got to improve them. And in a lot of cases, you got to get these guys into an NFL caliber weight program to get them bigger, stronger, so they can handle the rigors of the NFL game. So that's the thing you can already see Gase relating with the players at another level compared to Philbin. I mean, the guys on this team seem to just have taken to him, and they love him. And that's a night and day difference from him and Philbin. And really, it's a breath of fresh air for me in regards to he and Gase, how he talks about the players, how he's looking forward to working with the players. He's looking forward to working with Ryan, which also we know by now Philbin was trying to get him the hell out of Miami. And I'm excited about what this staff can do and the coaches that we've got, because I think these guys can do a much better job of developing and coaching these guys than the previous staff has done by far.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Tony. I think everybody's excited to see Philbin gone and see Gase back with the team. But unfortunately, we're running out of time on this week's podcast. But we'll definitely be back next Tuesday, and hopefully you'll be able to call in and continue the conversation, Tony. We always love having you on the show, and we love your insight and your input. You're definitely a well-educated Dolphins fan when it comes to that. So we appreciate the call for sure.
Enjoy it, guys.
Yep. Take care, man.
Thanks, Tony.
And definitely keep up to date. Follow the PhinManiacs on Twitter and keep up to date. We're gonna be trying to be bringing you some more exclusive interviews like we did with Zach Vigil this week. We're expecting to have some more to come. So we'll be trying to get as much information out as possible. So definitely keep up. If you're a Dolphins fan, this is the place to get it. Special thanks again to Ron. We always love having you on the show. And
Thanks, man.
we're looking forward to the draft. It's close, guys. But anyway, from the PhinManiacs, Lewis Sung, and everybody else, thanks for tuning in.